Okay, so the actual pipeline is done now, but as a bonus, we can build an auto-generated podcast together. Now, these could be actual podcast episodes that you publish on a proper podcast, or maybe you'll use them as audio overviews to embed in your newsletter. That's what I'm doing with my newsletter at gammavibe.com. So this is going to fit pretty well into our pipeline architecture. It's going to work very similar to image generation. So we're going to have two steps. First, we generate a podcast script. And then in the second step, we'll turn that script into actual audio. Now, before we jump to the implementation, we'll need to think about what the podcast should be like. Most importantly, who are the hosts? We'll need to establish their names, genders, roles, personalities, speech styles, mannerisms, and what focus or perspective they bring to the podcast. We also need to think about a podcast structure. Given our well-defined newsletter structure, we should come up with a complementary podcast structure that results in an engaging conversation while touching all the key points about our business idea. Now, while we could try to come up with this right now and then give Claude Code some prompts to handle the implementation, I think this might be a good opportunity to try a more open-ended approach. So we'll brainstorm these questions with Claude first. So let's start with figuring out who our podcast hosts should be. Here's a prompt I'm using. I want to create a podcast to go along with the written newsletter. This should be an engaging conversation with two hosts that each represent a different perspective and bring their own personality and mannerisms that make for an enjoyable yet informative listen. Before we proceed to the implementation, please brainstorm the actual podcast format with me, starting with the two hosts. Given our daily startup idea newsletter, what personas would be a good match? Think about their respective roles, personalities, speech styles, signature phrases, mannerisms, and focus. So let's see what we get. We'll probably iterate a couple more times until we zero in on two hosts. Ultimately, we'll need to find names and genders as well. But let's start here. See what Claude comes up with. Okay, here Claude responded. Let's scroll up a bit. And by the way, most often I tend to do these things on the web using either Claude or Gemini or whatever. But we can do this right here in Claude Code as well. Okay, what does it say? Great starting point for a brainstorm. Here are two hosts concepts I think would work well together. Okay, so it even proposed names directly. So what do we have here? Host 1, Jamie, the opportunity hunter. So background, twice founder, one exit, one expensive education, now an angel investor and startup advisor. Has seen enough cycles to recognize timing, but never lost the excitement of a new idea. So Jamie's role is the pitcher. Jamie reads the news hook and immediately starts seeing possibilities. Who builds this? Why now? What the aha moment is for customers. Personality, infectious enthusiasm, pattern matcher, loves connecting dots across industries, gets genuinely animated, sometimes leaps so far ahead that Alex has to pull them back. Speech style fast, builds momentum, lots of, and here's the thing, and wait, no, actually, when they refine their own thought mid-sentence, uses literally and honestly a lot, trails into tangents, then snaps back with, anyway, the point is. Okay, I like this. That's pretty evocative already. Signature phrases. Okay, here's the thing. This is the one, I'm calling it. I would have killed for this when I was building X. And that's where it gets interesting. The focus is on market timing, why this idea is possible now, the emotional resonance of the problem, founder market fit. And the quirk almost always has a half-baked version of this idea that they almost pursued years ago. That's a really interesting twist, actually. I like that. That could add some flavor to the podcast. Overall, this personality is not unlike the Ada personality in my own podcast on Gamma Vibe. Feel free to listen if you're curious. But I have Gata as a developer, actually, a very enthusiastic developer that has all these ideas. And then my other host is Charles, who's the kind of more seasoned, skeptical venture capitalist. So let's see what Claude proposes as the other host. The other host is Alex. By the way, I'm noticing that it picked two names, Jamie and Alex, that can both work just as well for male or female hosts. So I'm guessing it did this very deliberately to keep that open so we don't have to commit to a particular gender for either of these hosts yet. So let's see what we have here. Alex, the business model dissector. Background, years in strategy consulting, then deep dive tech business writing. Runs a newsletter obsessed with unit economics and how companies actually make money. Has a mental spreadsheet for everything. Role, the interrogator, but not a cynic. Alex wants the idea to work, just needs to see the math. When something genuinely clicks, their praise lands harder because it's rare. Personality, dryly funny, measured, deliberate with pauses. The dry wit is the entertainment. Not despite the skepticism, but because of it. Occasionally breaks into unexpected enthusiasm when an idea is airtight, which is a signal to the audience that something real just happened. Speech style, slower than Jamie, uses silence as punctuation, loves a well, actually, and a well-timed sure, references obscure failed startups by name as cautionary tales. I like that. Asks questions that sound simple but aren't. The signature phrases are, walk me through the unit economics. Okay, but who specifically is the customer? I'll give you that one. This is giving me failed startup vibes, and I mean that as a warning. Sure, the loaded kind. Okay, probably more like sure. Okay, focus. Distribution, monetization model, defensibility, who actually pays and why, what kills this in year 2. Quirk, always has a dead startup cautionary tale that's eerily relevant. Yeah, I think those are very complementary perspectives. That's pretty similar to what I'm doing with my own podcast. So I think overall this will work quite well. What do we have here? The dynamic. The show works because Jamie and Alex are not adversarial. They're collaborative, and each secretly respects what the other brings. The tension is productive. Jamie drags Alex towards excitement. Alex anchors Jamie in reality. When they agree that something is legitimately good, listeners feel it. Suggested episode arc. Oh, okay, so it even moved ahead to brainstorming the podcast structure. That's fine. I was going to do this in a follow-up, but let's see what we have here. So we have the cold open. Jamie drops the news soak in one sentence. Then the pitch. Jamie lays out the startup idea with excitement. The stress test. Alex interrogates customer, distribution, economics, moat. Then we have the synthesis. They land on what would have to be true for this to work. And finally, the verdict. Each gives a quick invest, pass, watch list call with one sentence of reasoning. Okay? A few things worth deciding before we go further. Names. Jamie and Alex are there we go. Jamie and Alex are gender-neutral placeholders. Do you want to keep that ambiguity or define them more explicitly? So we will need to define them more explicitly because as a next step, we're also going to be auditioning some voices. We're going to use Google AI Studio here as well. They have a really nice text-to-speech model. And in Google AI Studio, you can nicely listen to the different voices. So at that point, we'll kind of want to decide anyway what gender we want to assign to each of these hosts. We can brainstorm a bit more on this. Let's see, tone target. Closer to My First Million, loose, funny, riffing. I'm not familiar with either of these. The second one is acquired, more structured, deeper dives. Okay, so we can answer that. Next, episode length. Given this is a daily newsletter, probably short, 5 to 10 minutes, or longer on a weekly cadence. Yeah, I was actually thinking more like 4 minutes. Otherwise, with a daily podcast, we're going to lose people pretty quickly. But obviously, you can do whatever you like here. If you want a longer form podcast, there's definitely plenty of material to work with to develop this a bit more. But I'm going to, I think, err on the shorter side. Audio format. Are you planning to use a text-to-speech service? For example, 11 Labs? Or is this script only for now? All right, so let me reply to this initial brainstorming take here, and then we'll proceed to the next step. Okay, so here's my response. The two host personas are perfect. Comments and answers below. Names. So I think Jamie and Alex are totally fine, but I think we can explore a few more options before we finalize those. So I'm saying names, let's make the first host male and the second female. And I'm mostly doing that just to keep it interesting, because for my podcast that I'm using for Gamma Vibe, it's the other way around. So there I have Ada as the excited developer and Charles as the more skeptical VC. So let's flip it around here. And then I say, please suggest 10 more name pairs to choose from. Tone target, I'm not familiar with those shows. I think somewhat loose, funny, and riffing sounds great though. But we'll still want to stick with a rough episode arc like you suggested. And obviously, for your own podcast, this is really where you dial it in, right? Where you put your own spin on it. Episode length, let's aim for about 4 minutes, given that this is a daily podcast based on a fairly short newsletter post. Audio format, we'll discuss the implementation details after we've finalized the format and hosts, but yes, I plan to use the Gemini TTS model, but hold off with implementation details until we've finalized the structure. You sometimes have to be pretty explicit with Claude. All of these LLMs are so action-oriented, and they always try to sort of pull you along to the next step, but I'm not ready for that. And then I'm also adding, regarding the verdict, given that our newsletter proposes startup ideas that a developer or entrepreneur should build, and we've vetted those ideas with our research, the podcast should end on a supportive note, right? Because I think it would be a bit weird if we release these newsletter ideas and we frame this as, hey, here's a really cool idea that you should build. And then the podcast ends up saying, well, that's a stupid idea. This will never work. So that could be fun, but it wouldn't really fit. So for this purpose, I want those to be somewhat consistent. So let's see what Claude has to say to this. Okay, so Claude suggested the following 10 name pairs, each chosen to feel natural when said together. So let's see. We have Marcus and Claire, Ryan and Priya, Jake and Nadia, Ben and Sasha, Eli and Quinn, Noah and Dana, Owen and Zoe, Cam and Layla, Finn and Maya, and Theo and Rena. Yeah, those are all pretty nice, and they're all pretty short. I kind of like the ring of the second one. Of course, we can kind of mix and match too, or honestly pick any name. But Ryan and Priya, I kind of like that. So let's go with those. What else? Verdict. Rally. Since the newsletter has already done the vetting, the closing shouldn't be a should we build this debate. That's already resolved. Instead, the ending should flip to forward-looking energy. Who is the right person to build this? What's the first move? Why now is the moment? Ends on a go build it note rather than a verdict. Alex's skepticism pays off here. When she signs off enthusiastically, it lands with weight. Okay, sounds perfect. Episode arc revised for about 4 minutes. So we have a short hook, the idea, the interrogation, the unlock, and then the rally. Pick your name pair and we can lock in the full format. Okay, that's perfect. So next, I'm going to tell it a little bit about what I have in mind for the implementation. Again, using the 2-step approach that we're using with images as well. So 1 step to create the script, and then another step to create the audio. So I will tell it to do that, and then to add all the information about the hosts for the speaker profiles. We'll kind of need this in both of those steps, right? So for the script step, this will actually help us with generating the right script, the right text based on their personalities and employing their mannerisms, their signature phrases, and things like that. But then we'll also pass some version of this into the actual audio step, because this is also important for generating the audio. You actually have a lot of influence over what the audio sounds like by telling it like how these hosts behave. Like, do they speak fast or slow? What sort of accent do they have? And maybe even setting the scene, right? Like, where are they when they talk? Are they sitting together in a cafe, or are they dialing in, like one person from their home office, the other one sitting in their VC office or whatever? This can surprisingly like nudge the audio in subtle but noticeable ways.